Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to welcome you to the Town of Los Gatos Joint Town Council, Parking Authority and Redevelopment Agency meeting of February 7th. First of all, I'd like to ask everyone to turn their cells to off or vibrate so that they do not disturb the meeting, and ask Madam Clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Stephen Leonardis.
Here.
Councilmember Barbara Spector. Here. Councilmember Diane McNutt is absent tonight. Vice Mayor Steve Rice.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Joe Prusinski.
Here. And just for information, council member is absent tonight because she is ill. That would be Councilmember McNutt. All right, first item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. And again, we have a young leader in our community present with us tonight. He is James Marino. He is a Los Gatos Youth Commissioner. James is a junior at Los Gatos High School. He participates in Reality Check and Freshman Skills Day, which are part of the peer-to-peer education program at Los Gatos High. He's a contributor to the El Gato, the Los Gatos High School newspaper. He's a volunteer at St. Luke's Soup Kitchen, participates in track and field at Los Gatos, likes writing, cooking, snowboarding, working out, and reading, not necessarily in that order. He's proud to be a second-generation Los Gatan, and he's passionate about helping peers and the community. And one day, he hopes to be involved in politics in this town. Hopefully, after I've already left council, so there's no competition. But I'd like to ask James to come forward, please. And if I could ask you to rise, and we will salute the flag. James.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's thank James for participating tonight. James, before you leave, we have a lovely parting gift for James tonight. Thank you. Thanks for working with us. Okay. Let's hear it one more time for James. Now, I'd ask that all members of the audience who are interested in speaking tonight for council, would you please fill out one of these buff cards that is contained in the pocket in front of you and bring it to the clerk. And if you would indicate what agenda item you wish to speak on, that would be great. The first item is council and town manager reports. Are there any council matters to be dealt with? No. Seeing none, I'm going to ask for the closed session report. Madam Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Since the council last met at its regularly scheduled meeting on January 18th, council met as duly noticed in closed session after the meeting on January 18th and again after the special meeting workshop retreat on Saturday, January 22nd. In both items, council took no action and there's nothing to report out.
Thank you, Madam Attorney. Mr. Manager, are there council matters tonight?
3 items for the mayor and council and public. First, this Friday evening, the Los Gatos Library and Los Gatos Friends of the Library are hosting our annual portion of the Silicon Valley Reads program. It will be here in the council chambers starting at 7 p.m. The Silicon Valley Reads book this year is The Year of Fog by local award-winning author Michelle Richmond. And the program Friday night here in the council chambers will start at 7 p.m. with a book signing by the author, and then at 7:30 with remarks by the author, as well as a poem inspired by the book by the Los Gatos Poet Laureate, Parthenia Hicks. So it'll be an interesting evening on Friday night as part of Silicon Valley Reads. A week later, for the President's Day holiday weekend, Town Hall will be closed, including the library, from Saturday morning, the 19th, through the Monday holiday. And this closure is for an electrical shutdown for installation of the new emergency generator behind Town Hall that's required for the refurbishment and revitalization of Pageant Park. However, dispatch will be operating and police services will be operating, as will the council chambers lobby for the quarterly Friends of the Library book sale. So, but the rest of the town civic center will be closed over President's Day weekend. And last, on Tuesday the 22nd, is the annual State of the Town as part of the normal council meeting. That concludes staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Manager.
We do.
And now we have Did You Know? And for presentation tonight, our Assistant Town Manager, Pamela Jacobs.
Good evening. Did you know that the Los Gatos Redevelopment Agency has provided many significant contributions to the community? The agency was established in 1991 in response to the devastating Loma Prieta earthquake that caused great damage to the downtown. Redevelopment was used as a very important financing tool to repair the damage, to revitalize downtown, and to reconstruct deteriorated infrastructure. Among the accomplishments of redevelopment have been many downtown improvements, including new sidewalks and street furniture, street paving and alley paving throughout the downtown, the renovation of Town Plaza Park. These improvements, combined with business promotion and assistance in the downtown, have contributed greatly to downtown Los Gatos' vitality and has led to downtown Los Gatos being consistently recognized as the best downtown in Silicon Valley. Redevelopment funding has also been used to build affordable housing for families and seniors. And in 2009, the police operations building, which was partially funded by redevelopment, opened on Los Gatos Boulevard, and this provides functional and safe facility for our police patrol and for our town's emergency operations center. And finally, now under construction and scheduled to open in early 2012, redevelopment provided the bulk of the funding for the new Los Gatos Library, which will offer many state-of-the-art library services to the community. All of these improvements have helped to improve the condition in downtown, have stimulated other investment in the downtown and throughout the town, and have added to the overall quality of life in Los Gatos. For more information about these projects, you can check our website, and for specific questions on redevelopment, you may call the town manager's office at 354-6832. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. And I assume the governor was watching tonight's program so that he is aware of the significance of redevelopment for our community. All right, the next item on the agenda is consent. And this would be a number of items able to be acted on in a single motion. We have one speaker card for item 1B, and so we'll pull that item, and we will hear that item immediately after we have completed consent. There's another item I would like to pull, and that is item 5, and we will take that up at the end of the meeting after our public hearings about the two proposals in front of us tonight. So, if I can have a motion, Councilmember Spector.
Move to approve the consent calendar exclusive of item 5 and, was it 1 or 1B that was
1B.
pulled? Exclusive of item 5 and 1B.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. That brings us then to verbal communications. Okay. And we have a couple of cards for verbal communication. The first is Mr. Carl Gardino and his assistant. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brzezinski and members of the council. My name is Carl Gordino. I live at 489 Bird Avenue in Los Gatos, and I'm here tonight wearing my hat as CEO of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. This is Sienna. She has yielded the balance of her time to me. With that, I'm here tonight on behalf of our 335 member companies with something that has been passed out to you or is about to be passed out. Encouraging you or a member of the council, if not more than one, to consider joining us in Washington, D.C., March 15th through 17th, and in Sacramento, April 12 and 13. What we're passing out to you are 2 white papers. One is a federal issues white paper that we put together with our 335 members at the request of U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein to answer a simple question. What would it take in Washington, D.C. for employers to start producing manufacturing and technology jobs in the United States again? And we were asked by Governor Brown to put together a similar white paper answering that same question from a state perspective. What would it take for employers to start producing manufacturing and technology jobs in California again? We think this is a message that we're united as employers with local public officials who get it and understand it and want to help communicate it. So again, there's more information there. We hope that Mayor, either yourself or a member of the town council, can join us both in Sacramento and in D.C. With that, Sienna and I are done, except for any questions that you would like answered that she will answer for you.
Any questions for Sienna? How about Mr. Gardino? Seeing none, thank you very much and appreciate the offer, and we'll see whatever we can do to make that happen.
Thank you very much, sir.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak under verbal communications at this time? I have a couple of cards. One is from Michael Silva, and the other one is from Jeff Mitchell. Now, we're gonna be talking about the minutes of the 31st meeting, which is item 1B. So, is that something that I can see you both back there, so you can nod your head. Do we want to speak it for the minutes, or do we want to speak in verbal? Okay, then we're going to do it in verbal, okay? Then, Mr. Mitchell, would you come forward?
Good evening, council members. Jeff Mitchell, 115 Panorama Way. I just wanted to take a minute of time to come back down following the hearing we had on the 31st. I wanted to voice concerns about process, and I think that there's been some reference made last meeting as to a need to sync up and harmonize with the Planning Commission around some of the topics and understandings. I wanted to point out that during the meeting last month, I had referenced in a historical statement made by the town council as to the term of neighborhood and in reference to Panorama Way and Union Avenue. I wanted to point out, is the overhead on? I wanted to point out, I don't need to put it on, that's fine, that in the meeting minutes from the February 2010 town council meeting, that the amended motion by council member Steve Rice to remand the application back to Planning Commission for further review in light of new information that was given, and I quote, that the neighborhood compatibility issue should focus primarily on Panorama Way and Union Avenue as the neighborhood for the benefit of the applicant who specifically requested information on perspective of density and site suitability. And I wanted to just point out that that motion passed unanimously, and every member, with the exception of Steve, was there. And then in the meeting we had last week, references were made to Panorama Way should not solely be used when determining neighborhood, and that Councilmember Rice had actually indicated that he feels Panorama Way is the primary influence, but that it shouldn't be the sole consideration. And there seems to be a conflict. So the reason I wanted to bring this information up is I spent 25 years as a resident of Los Gatos, 4 as a homeowner, 3 battling or at least trying to get something reasonable out of these proceedings for our property and our neighborhood. I believe you had mentioned there was an offsite coming up where you might be working with the Planning Commission. I wanted to plead that any hearing related to this property happen after that, that we have a chance for you and the Planning Commission to get in harmony about your understanding about neighborhood and about the planning codes and guidelines that we've been so aggressively pointing to. There seems to be a bit of a disconnect. So that's really the point I wanted to make. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. The next speaker is Tom Mangano, under verbal communication. Or would, okay, then hold on, we'll go to the minutes. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak under verbal communication? And this is about some item that's not on the agenda tonight. All right. Would you let me pick up this card, which was just given me? This is Michael Calise. Mr. Calise.
Hello, everybody. I just thought I would come by and speak for a few moments and give the council and members here a bit of an update on my plans to supply Mr. Capurzo and Mr. Larson some information which will be helpful in the council's assessment of what it requested in the December 6th town meeting, which I was unable to attend. There's information that was requested that was, town needed more information. Town needed more information about the financial upfront costs, the ongoing costs, impact of how the town could support this multi-use parking spaces and how it might affect visitors. The fact that it felt rushed, certainly, we were under time limits, it seemed as though, and the fact that it felt vendor-driven. In addition, what programs are out there that the town could make use of that exist for free, low-cost, and ongoing support equipment, and just really addressing the need of why this might make sense for the town in various different areas, whether it be the library or others, to do it sooner than later. So what I've done in the last couple of months is I'm almost complete with that report, and will deliver that report to Mr. Capurzo within a week, and that would hopefully give the town the information it desires to make a more informed decision moving forward. I've taken that on as a citizen for the benefit of the community and the town, because I'm able to do it. I have knowledge that can support the information. There is one thing I wanted to say, in that there is new information within the last few days where the Bay Area Air Quality Management District has funded 4 Bay Area companies to put another 1,700 Level 2 chargers. These are the chargers that would do well here, as well as the first funding of what's called DC fast chargers, which are more commercial and very expensive. But the good news there is there's now 4 companies that got granted funds that could play into municipality installations. It may very well be that, in fact, they're earmarked for home use only, and therefore my recommendation would be my original one. So we'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Calise, and I'm assuming you will take that information also beyond tonight to our staff to have that discussion. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. The next individual who's going to speak under verbal is Michael Silva.
Good evening, Council. My name is Michael Silva. Happy New Year. I haven't seen some of you for a while. I'd like to talk about the traffic downtown and the speed limits and the pedestrians getting hit in the crosswalks. This has been going on for a long, long time. I live at the north end, right just past Blossom Hill, 675 North Santa Cruz. And I watched those people come up to that stoplight in front of my house doing 45 miles an hour and have to stop quick because the light changes, and also fight to get into the left-hand lane. Once they get off that light, they're doing 35 miles an hour by the time they get past the 7-Eleven, and they don't stop. They just move. We've got DMV there. We've got Safeway coming in. We've got the new development there right by Chase, where Edna Ray's and all that used to be. We've got a crosswalk right there that comes across from, Walgreens, where people have been hitting that. They're racing to that point, Highway 9. Once they get across that, they're racing through town again. Look what's happened. And then even from down to Main Street, when you hit Main Street and turn left and go towards the high school, it's 25, but they're doing 35, even with the stop signs. I mean, they don't care. Let's just step on the gas and get going. We need to do something about that. And I have some suggestions on that I'd like to bring a little later, so this is kind of a precursor to that, and you'll see something I've written about that in the days to come. I know of businesses in the downtown area known as from Highway 9 to Main Street that are looking to expand, a few of them, all right? My concern is, what are they doing with the parking down there? How are more people going to help anything? More cars, more traffic, more speeding. I think it needs to be addressed. I'm not sure how all the conditional use permits go on down there. I had a business at Broadway in Santa Cruz for 23 years. We didn't have that animal at that particular time. You know, we opened up a business and we did it. Whatever you did inside your business, you did it. You had a use permit to, I had a salon. To have a salon, I did it, okay? So I think before anything happens where you allow more people to be rushing in there in the busy times and speeding through those streets, you ought to think about that and consider the speed limit change as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Silva. That brings us to the end of all the cards for verbal communication. One more time, if anybody in our public tonight would like to speak under verbal communication about some item not on the agenda, please indicate that.
And Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
As is our common practice, I've asked our Director of Parks and Public Works to contact Mr. Michael Silva to get additional information on the concern he raised tonight.
Thank you very much. All right, that brings us then to, we'll take this as other business, and we're going to be talking about the one item pulled from consent. There were two items pulled, 1B and 5. We're going to take 5 at the end of the public hearings under other business at that point, but we'll take care of this item pulled from consent, and that would be item 1B. There are a couple of desk items for council that I hope you had a chance to refer to. I had requested that there be some revisions to the page 5 of the council minutes of the 31st, and I think to better reflect what was actually said, because I think there was some confusion in the first part of that regarding a joint study session that I had proposed for the Planning Commission to deal with neighborhood compatibility as well as plan development and community benefit. And we heard that there was an interest on the part of the neighbors on Panorama to speak to this issue prior to our next hearing. I don't know if that's something we're going to be doing because the manager and I are looking for the date to reflect that. But the fact is that I think there's a better framing of that item in the revised minutes. And then I believe that Councilmember Spector also wanted to indicate a revision.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am looking at the proposed revised minutes that begin with commented at the town council. I have no issue with the revised minutes as worded, with the exception that bullet 3 references that homes in the area around the property should be considered. And it is accurate that there were some council members or council member that did make that statement. However, as part of my motion, when I was asked if Leeward Court could be considered by the Planning Commission, the statement I made in response and as maker of the motion is reflected in a desk item. Maker of the motion clarified that it is up to the Planning Commission to consider all of the facts, and if the Planning Commission decides to consider Leeward Court in determining neighborhood compatibility, that is acceptable. So that is the statement I made, and that I would like added to our minutes to be consistent with having having some council people say should, and in my statement is that it could. So it would be my motion to, and I don't know if it's time yet because I know people want to speak to it. So you want me to wait before I make a motion? Okay.
All right, and I agree with the maker of the original motion that that was exactly what was stated in the motion itself with the amendment that Councilmember Spector indicated. And just a reminder that in our minutes, those points that are called commented, and so forth, that's a reflection of what was said in the course of the meeting. It's not a reflection of the decision made by the body, which is only contained in the motion itself. And that, I hope that clarifies what occurred there. Now we have one speaker card before we get to a motion, and this is Mr. Tom Mangano. And Mr. Mangano, you will have 3 minutes to speak to this.
Thank you. Actually, you've answered some of my questions because I saw 2 different versions, and I didn't know which one was the active one. So I just wanted to make sure that I thought the revised was more accurate. It's even more accurate now, but once you pass her motion. But I wanted to be sure that the revised one. And given the fact that the resolution ties back to the discussions, I wasn't quite sure what discussions was referring to. Is that a tape, or is that the discussion that is noted in the hearing, in the minutes? It's just one calls it discussions and one calls it discussion. So that was another question.
Okay.
And then just one comment on the minutes for me was, I thought it was significant that I sort of put up a trial balloon of at least a framework of what the neighborhood thought was maybe the next version of a design we see, but that did not get into the minutes at all. So I was just questioning, was that thrown out, or was there any reason that wasn't included? Those were that's the extent of my input.
Thank you. And my recollection is that was the proposal of a 2,700 square foot. Yeah. I do believe the minutes merely reflected, when it comes to Mr. Mangano, expressed concern there was an increase in mass in the design, commented the proposed project and requested council uphold the planning commission. That's kind of, it was almost boilerplate language throughout these sets of minutes. But I do recall that there was a specific request for 2,700 square foot. And I would not be averse to that being reflected, since it wasn't just an indication of interest and support, but rather something very specific.
Plus, I gave her a copy of the proposed framework.
Mm-hmm. But keep in mind that the minutes, they are actually a reflection of what was said. So.
And just a comment is that given the fact that 2 versions of a discussion came out of the same discussion, I just wonder if, and being we're this whole issue of what is the neighborhood, what's not the neighborhood, I wonder if and even Councilwoman Spector said it, well, how is the Planning Commission going to hear this? And it said, well, maybe they better listen to the to the hearing. So I don't know if maybe a transcript would be a good thing in play or what. Just a thought.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to recommend on the first run, and Councilmember Spector is going to make the motion, that we include under Mr. Mangano's comment something about that specific language that he gave you. That would be the 2,700-foot language. You do have that, correct, Madam Clerk? Yeah. And then with the revisions that we saw, both my revisions and the revisions offered by, in the desk item, offered by Councilwoman Spector, that would be the revised minutes. So, you have a comment to make, Mr. Manager?
Just to give explicit language for the approval of the minutes, a third bullet could be added under Mr. Mangano that said, presented a proposed framework for future approval of the project.
Okay. That would be sufficient. And
then it would
it's
reference the
inclusive of
document.
our, the reference back to the tape, for example. All right.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to move to approve the minutes of January 31st, 2011, the revised version that has been provided to us, and as amended to include the desk item on 1B for the meeting date 2/7/2011, and also to include the modification as referenced with regard to Mr. Mangano's 2,700 square foot proposal.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. That brings us to public hearings. And the first public hearing is item 8. This is to consider an appeal of the Planning Commission decision denying the request to add 3 stations to an existing personal service business. That would be Maddox Hair Salon, operated in conjunction with a retail store on property zone C2, and this is at 22 South Santa Cruz. And I'd ask the staff for their report.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. There is a desk item for this agenda item. It contains the revised personal service business map and one additional public comment. In February 2007, the Planning Commission approved a conditional use permit to operate a personal service business in conjunction with a retail store for the subject location. The approval allowed 480 square feet of salon use and 500 square feet for retail use. The retail area fronts on South Santa Cruz, and the salon use is limited to 4 salon stations and 2 shampoo chairs. The applicant is proposing to convert 400 square feet of the retail space in their business to personal service, to add 3 salon stations, and to retain approximately 100 square feet of retail space. The proposed modification will result in the relocation of the salon area from just the rear of the commercial space to occupy almost the entire space. The request may present a case where personal service business is appropriate because the location is outside the downtown core and there is only one other adjacent retail use to attract foot traffic. However, it is adjacent to other personal service businesses. Also, the project would remove a retail space from the current mix of uses in the Central Business District, where the general plan states that retail uses should be emphasized. In October 2010, the Planning Commission considered the request. The Commission denied the application based on the proposal's conflict with the provisions and objectives of the general plan, since it changes the mix of uses in the Central Business District, would remove a retail use where retail should be emphasized, and expands a personal service business where there are a number of existing personal service businesses nearby. An appeal was received on November 3rd, 2010. The basis for the appeal is that the Planning Commission did not want to set a precedent, and the applicant believes the CUP or conditional use permit modifications may be a policy issue for council. This concludes staff presentation, and staff is available for any questions.
Thank you. Questions of council? Vice Mayor.
The last time I was by that particular property, there was virtually no retail other than a small amount. Is that considered in violation of the current CUP?
It would, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, then we're going to move to our public presentation. I have 3 cards for item number 8, And anyone else in our public wish to speak to this item, please, again, fill out one of those buff cards and give it to our clerk here to my left. The first presenter is going to be Mr. Rastani. Before you speak, though, Mr. Rastani, just a reminder, we're going to have 10 minutes because I believe you are the applicant. Is that correct? Okay. I just want to make it clear that what we're doing is giving 10 minutes to any principal involved in the project itself. Okay, so you can divide up the 10 minutes however you wish, and then there'll be time for public presentation after that. So that would mean that Mr. Ron Tate would be the presenter. Mr. Tate.
Thank you. Good evening, council members. My name is Ron Tate. I reside at 16679 Madrone in Los Gatos, and my office building is at 22 South Santa Cruz Avenue, Los Gatos. I purchased the building in 1999 as my headquarters for my development business, which I've been in for 50 years. And that doesn't mean I get it all right, especially not in this market. But anyway, the issue is that when we first purchased the property, there was a beauty supply that was mostly retail, and they eventually got 4 chairs approved for salon purposes, and they went bankrupt and moved out. I next then hired real estate brokers to help me fill the space, and we were able to get a high-end jewelry store, which failed, and unfortunately it turned into a kind of an ugly eviction process. And then the next retailer was a women's boutique, which failed, and I had, virtually very little collection of rent because she just didn't make it. And the difference between, there's nothing wrong with absentee property owners, but I'm not an absentee property owner. I spend more time there than I do at my home. And I live with my tenants. I see them every day, and I understand their trials and tribulations in trying to make a living. Obviously, things were much different in 1999 economically. In any event, it's a situation whereby I understand what the city's goal is to have retail as much as they can, and my goals are the same as yours because I live in Los Gatos. I like the holes in my street patched. I like the police services we have here, and I like the town of Los Gatos. I support the arts and the jazz and the plaz, and I'm here every day. I'm only 75, so I'm just getting started. I'm reinventing myself every day, but I do love living in this town, and I want it to be successful. However, in good conscience, I would be unconscionable for me to have another retailer come along and say, this is a great place for retail. And all you people are very intelligent business people, but I will tell you, you have to have synergy. You have to have a core, and you have to have companion retail space to make it work. Just imagine from Main Street going south, we have 3 city blocks, basically, and we have 2 retailers. There's the flower shop, and there's the hardware store. And the hardware store, by all intent and purposes, is considered destination. People come there for a very specific reason, to pick up what they need for a job or a home repair, and they leave. They don't stay and shop. The flower shop is doing very poorly, and at the end of their lease, they've informed me they will no longer stay there. So I just couldn't, I just can't hire a real estate broker and say, gee, go tell them it's a great spot for retail, because it isn't. And unfortunately, there's nothing on the horizon that makes it better. I'm certainly not going to ask you to tear the park down. If you did, I would be the first standing up here screaming and hollering. And we have the post office, which is a great amenity to the city to have a post office. So for the foreseeable future, for 3 city blocks, there will be no retail. If you go north from Main Street down to Highway 9 or Los Gatos Boulevard, there are 51 retailers. And so there's just not, it's hard to explain, but it's just when you build shopping, you do shopping. I've built over 2 million square feet of shoppings, and I didn't buy my building for the commercial. I purchased it because that's where I want to live, because I spend more time than I do at home. So that being said, it's very difficult for me to go out if the salon doesn't make it, or when the flower shop goes out. I really can't, in good conscience, go out and tell someone it's a great spot, because it isn't. It's a great town, but it's just not a great spot for retail, because you just don't have people walking around shopping. So that being said, the current tenant, I've given him a considerable amount of free rent and great rent concessions, which he will tell you, and I gave him a lease, so if he doesn't make a living, he can get out of his lease. So we all actually, salons are not void of retail, but they're just not full blown on retail. So if we lose the current tenant, we all lose. I lose a tenant, we lose retail sales, and if we add 3 more chairs, which, by the way, in about 1,000 square feet, if you take the average of every salon in town, that's about the average. It would average about 7 chairs based on other square footage. And I realize that's not the criteria. The other thing is I have all of my employees, myself, everybody, we do not park in the parking lot. I pay for parking at in the Toll House garage during the daytime. So we leave the parking lot open for our customers. And Mr. Rastani, he does not park in the parking lot. His employees park elsewhere. So it's a very difficult situation. I know everybody comes here with a hardship, but I will tell you, if he moves out, I almost would rather leave it vacant than try to induce someone else to come into the space, because most of our retailers in this town, it's not Apple, and by the way, I'm glad Apple's in town. I like the tax dollars from them, but it's just not. We have mostly, local residents, or not everybody's local, but they try to make a living in this town. It's very, very difficult, even in the best of times. So my point is my particular location is not by any traditional standards considered to be a commercial location. It just isn't. I mean, I know what you want, and I would like to give it to you. I'd much rather have the jewelry store or a boutique if they could make it, but they just don't make it. Renee Chesney, who was there before, I think she's one of the hardest working people I have ever met. She worked that boutique 7 days a week, and at the final analysis, she just couldn't make it. She couldn't advertise enough. She couldn't spend enough advertising dollars to draw the people down the street. So what I'm requesting is this be approved for 3 additional chairs. If not, we really all lose. I lose, you lose, because we're just not going to have a tenant in there, because I just would not, in good consciousness, say to someone it's a great spot for retail, unfortunately. And that being said, if you have any questions, I would like to leave the rest of my time for questions.
Actually, what I'd like to do is have Mr. Rastani come up then for the rest of your 10 minutes, and then if we have questions, we'll ask at the end of that 10 minutes, okay? This is Mr. Eric Rastani.
Thank you. Pardon me if I'm unclear tonight. I'm a little under the weather. I've taken over this
Mr.
space.
Rastani, will you raise the mic, please, for the television audience?
I've taken over this space primarily as a salon. My intention is to absolutely move retail. It requires additional stations in order for us to be able to maximize the retail space that we have. Mr. Tate has given me concessions on rent in order to conduct business. My intention, Mr. Vice Mayor, was to bring in more retail and actually maximize that space. I'm a cash-only business. I don't believe in credit. So far, it's been able to keep my bills down. One of my staff members were supposed to be here this evening to speak on the limited numbers of stations that he had in a salon that he actually just recently closed down, IMRU Salon. He couldn't be here this evening. He wanted me to relay the difficulties that he had preceding his closure of his business because of the limited number of stations that he had. I now have him in my salon, and he's a great person to have in there and help coach me in some of the areas in maximizing my business. I've reached a point where I feel a little constricted in what I can do with the amount of stations that I do have in the salon. My intention is to sell retail. It requires a lot less space to sell salon-based products as opposed to jeans and regular retail. We do have in our plans to have a lot of storage space in some of the cabinets so that we can carry backup retail and keep it rotating through the salon. and maximizing the actual space that we do have. Mr. Tate did write in our contract that if I do need to back out, we've worked it out to where I can exit if I need to. But at this point, I really want to make this salon work here.
Great. Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant from council? Vice Mayor.
A question for Mr. Tate, actually.
Mr. Tate, come back to the mic, please.
You commented that, and you also put it in your letter, that you don't think the Orchid store is going to stay, and that, I know they've been there a number of years. How long have they been there, and what would be your...
They've been there about 5 years.
Okay, and what would you propose for that space once they leave?
I have no idea. I wish I did. And I really pay her to sweep the sidewalk. I help. You know, it's not like a hard-nosed shopping center where if the tenant doesn't pay, you just kick them out. She's a great tenant. She doesn't park her cars in the parking lot. She's very pleasant. She works hard, but it's really difficult. I mean, it's just very, very difficult for retail to make it. But she's there, surviving. I do want to mention one thing. You mentioned, are we in violation of the CUP? Actually, the retail space is available, but in a salon, you just can't stack just layers of stuff. There's a flow of traffic and things like that. But we do have, I think, if you counted up all the retail that we're going to have in the windows and everything else, we could be close to 50%. If he had 3 additional chairs, I think we'd be pretty close to 50% of the space for retail. He's got more shelving, more kiosks that he's going to add to the salon area.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Councilmember Spector?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I hope that the orchid store doesn't go because I like it, I like her, and I buy my orchids there.
Oh, she's a great resident. She's a great person. She's a great sort of ambassador for Los Gatos.
Now, although, quite frankly, the rents, the amount of the rents and rent concessions is not a critical issue to me in making conditional use permit decisions, we have had some conflicting input or evidence. Your tenant said that you gave rent concessions. You said that it was free rent. But then we had input by letter that there was charges of $3 per square foot for retail, but $4 per square foot for salon space. Could you enlighten me there?
Not true. I don't know where the conflicting report comes from. We have rent, and then we have what's called common area maintenance, where we all share, we all share in whatever the cost is for the sweeping the parking lots, the janitorial service for the downstairs bathrooms for that. But but the rents basically, when you have to take out all the concession, everything else, they are less than $3 a square foot when you take the concessions out.
Okay, any other questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember, please.
Mr. Tate, you talked about the hardware store being a destination retailer, and you spoke about the previous women's clothes store and the jeweler that couldn't survive in that location. And I just wondered if you ever pursued or considered any other types of businesses. There are so many other entities besides the 2 that you mentioned, and that location to me just gets an astounding amount of traffic. I just can't see why another retail entity wouldn't be considered. And can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, there's two types of traffic. There's vehicle traffic. And the vehicle
Mr. Tate, into the microphone.
I'm sorry, excuse me. There's a vehicle traffic because once you get past Main Street, the traffic moves very quickly because it's moving out the 17. You don't have the slow traffic, bumper to bumper that you have during normal business hours down there, but it moves very fast. But the foot traffic is really minimal there, very minimal. You have no one walks down that direction in general. No one. Very limited people that go to that direction. They're walking to the hotel. People do not walk to hardware stores, generally speaking. Most people park, and they have good parking. They park in the parking lot, pick up their supplies, and they leave. So it's yes, we've we advertised, we tried to get other tenants into the property. So it's not what it's quite honestly, it's not what I consider, it's what the tenants consider. Because when you hire a broker to lease your space, I have some great ideas what I'd like to have there, but they won't go there. It just doesn't have enough foot traffic. Shopping retail is sort of a science. You know if you get so many footsteps with so many people shopping, like generally speaking, when someone goes down on North Santa Cruz Avenue, they stop to get whatever it is. The other day I went into the pharmacy to get a chair massage, which by the way is really great down there, and my wife was with me, and she says, well, instead of going home and coming back, I'll just walk around. And she came back with about a whole bunch of merchandise, which wasn't approved, but it was it's one of those things. But so you have to make retail work, you really have to have companion, or you have to have, it's destination. If you could get the jewelry store as destination, they advertised a lot, and they had really nice stuff in there, and expensive stuff, and some inexpensive stuff. They couldn't get the traffic. And they do very well up in Burlingame, by the way, because they're right downtown Burlingame. So they thought, well, gee, downtown Los Gatos, we have, high income, so they thought the retail might work really well, but it didn't work at all.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Just a follow-up question. It seems like Los Gatos, we have a number of salons, we have a number of cleaners. There's a lot of business repetition on the Strip, but there's also a lot of businesses that you don't see, like, a men's shoe store or a chocolatier or something that, would be conducive of the farmers market traffic or Jazz in the Plaza traffic right there. It just seems like such an opportunity for somebody to do some retail business out of that spot. And I understand where you're coming from with your comments with the jewelry store and some things, but we have several jewelers in town already. And I saw in your letter you gave it, or your testimony from the Planning Commission, you gave it the old college try. And I was just wondering, further thoughts on possibilities of some other retailers. Again, you mentioned the commercial brokers being people you hire to find people who are willing to take on the risk of going out in this economy and establishing a business. But I just think there's so many opportunities to continue this as a retail spot. Just having a little bit of difficulty with that.
Well, I appreciate your thoughts. It's interesting. The farmers market is a whole different animal. And by the way, it's a great event. I go down there because I juice. I juice every day, so I go down there on the weekends and buy vegetables to juice with. Actually, the Orchid store does not. They tried to stay open on Sundays, but they can't have a booth over there because everything over there has to be grown on a farm, and brought in. So it really hurts her, actually. It doesn't help her at all because she cannot have a booth over there. And people she's been open on Sundays. She's tried it. Doesn't work out. She gets very little traffic because those people go there sort of a social event and they get their stuff and they go home. Believe me, I would much prefer to satisfy the needs of the city and have straight retail. It'd just be great. Then I wouldn't even be here tonight. But as it stands, I have a permit for 4 chairs. It's difficult with 4 chairs. With 3 chairs, it will be more successful. We'll have more retail. But like I said, if he goes out, I live in the building, and if I talk someone into moving in there and they don't do well, I see them every day. It's very difficult. I have shopping centers where I don't even see the people. They get leased out, and it's just, an ongoing business. But this is my home. This is my town.
Any other questions for Mr. Tate? All right. You'll have 5 minutes at the end to rebut.
Thank you.
If you have a chance, okay?
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think we do have a question.
Mr. Tate.
Councilman Neil Leonardis wants to ask you another question.
One more question. You mentioned that if you had to put it back out on the market as a retail establishment, you would feel not in good conscience to say it's a great retail location because of the issues you've had with the previous tenants. When you purchased the building...
Pardon?
When you purchased the building, did anybody mention that to you? Did they say, well, this is a great retail location, or this is just a so-so area? What was the thought process, or do you recall?
Well, let me tell you, I didn't do a lot of due diligence on that because I really wanted to be in that location. That was my really desire, to be in that location, because I'd built a building over on Hamilton Avenue where Fidelity Investments is, and I was there for 13 years. Live in Los Gatos. I just thought it'd be just great if I could bicycle to work, walk to work, run to work, and so it wasn't what I would consider a very good business decision from the retail standpoint. So, no, I didn't do a great amount of due diligence. Plus, times were quite a bit different. 1999, you could just about lease anything. You know, the business was much different, and it wasn't until 2004, 2005 that the market started to fall off. But no, I didn't. And answer your question, no. When I buy a piece of real estate, generally, I do a lot of due diligence, but that's where I wanted to be.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
We have one more card, and then anyone else who wants to speak to this item, this is item number 8 again, please fill out a buff card and bring it forward. It's Terry Hope is our presenter.
Good evening. I'm Terry Hope. I live at 212 Bella Vista, Los Gatos, and I have a business at 101 West Main Street. Been in business here for 30 years. I also know this particular location very well since my daughter leased that location and attempted to run a retail and salon combination business there. It was a great idea, she thought, but it didn't pan out. Sadly, the foot traffic didn't support the retail aspect, and neither did the economy. The salon aspect, she was able to rent out the 3 chairs and then use one herself, but it wasn't adequate to cover the rent, even though the rent was rather modest compared to much of Santa Cruz Avenue on the as you go north. It was a very, very challenging location. Ultimately, she did need to vacate that building because she was going to lose the business and her home if she continued to stay there. So she did relocate, as you know. I'm here just to suggest that you grant this request to add 3 more stations and make this location, which is already, for all intents and purposes, a salon with some retail, make it on a fair playing field with other salons. Other salons would, if you measured the square footage and you divided the number of stations per square foot, you'd see that they have twice as many. This isn't a competitive situation for this tenant or for this landlord. It's really just not a competitive and a viable, sustainable business as it is currently positioned. So, and I can also say that, surprisingly, and it's kind of counterintuitive, you'd think that there would be a very high traffic retail area. It simply isn't. It's night and day compared to the Main Street area and the Santa Cruz Avenue area once you go south of, say, Willow Street and Main Street, or north, excuse me. Any questions?
Any questions of Ms. Hope? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Hope.
Thank you.
Again, any other individuals interested in speaking to this issue? Seeing none, we're going to invite the applicant back up. I just wanted to make sure that the council is aware there was a desk item that was available to us. It was a revision of the personal service business map that's seen as attachment 8 in the orange highlights, and those are the locations of the businesses. And then there is a letter from Mr. Arzi that's attached to that, and I hope we all had a chance to take a look at that before we started to talk here. So, Mr. Tate, you have 5 minutes for conclusion. I don't know who you want to rebut,
Well, I don't
but
think it's going to take me
please.
5 minutes. Again, like I said, I live in the building. It's my home. My wife thinks I live there. She doesn't think I live at home because I spend a lot of time there. I enjoy what I do and been doing it for 50 years, and my son is in business with me. And I do believe you mentioned that are we in violation of the CUP? Actually, I don't believe we are. When we get because he's revamping it, and I think we will have pretty much 50% of when we put the new shelving in. That when Renee was there, I mean, she was definitely in violation of the CUP, but I want to make certain that first of all, I don't do an end run on the city. I don't want, I don't want it so everybody has their own rules, but we will have, by the time he gets this, if he gets 3 additional chairs, we can make it 50% retail. Now, the retail in a salon is a lot different because you have it stacked in, you have it stacked in front of where the station is, you have it stacked in the windows, you have it under, you have it under the shelf. So we have retail, and it's not void of retail. It just doesn't put out the kind of dollars per square foot that Apple might. And I'm not knocking Apple. I have Apple products and I enjoy them. But other than that, it's just a common sense situation. In all traditional standards, you can't have retail where there's no other retail unless you happen to be a Best Buy or a Target. They can stand alone. This kind of retail cannot stand alone. Just because I've been doing 50 years doesn't mean I have all the answers, but it just doesn't. And granted, yes, when I purchased the property, I didn't do my due diligence because I really wanted to live in that location. It's a great location. I could spend 24 hours a day there. It's wonderful. I open the windows at nighttime because I work lots of times at midnight. I hear the people on the street. It's marvelous. I love it there when it rains. I open all the windows and I feel like I'm working in Hawaii outdoors. It's a little colder, but anyway. But I would appreciate you considering this in this situation. If Mr. Stani goes broke and he can't live there, he can't make it, and I'm vacant for 6 months, well, I lose my, as I understand it, I lose my conditional use permit, and I'll have to figure out what else I'm going to do. My wife, just between you and I, who, don't tell her son, she would be on Hoarders if I didn't watch her. She'd love to have it for storage. So I mean, that doesn't help any of us. So help me help her not use it for storage. But I do appreciate you hearing me. I'm not trying to do an end run on the planning commission. I understand what the city's goals are, but my goals are the same as yours. I want the city to be run. I want the tax dollars to come in, and I will do what I can to help. But I don't know what to do. You asked me if when the flower shop goes out, I have no idea what I'm going to do. I really don't.
Thank you. Any last questions for Mr. Tate? Thank you, Mr. Tate.
Thank you.
This will close the public hearing at this time. And I look to the council for discussion and or a motion. Who would like to start? Okay. Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On this application, I am really interested in hearing the thoughts of the other council people, because I noticed in the Planning Commission it was 4-3 and 3-4, and when we approved this specific location to allow personal service in conjunction with the retail, I was torn on making that decision. And then when we did the personal service on Main Street, I was torn then also. And I recall then Mayor McNutt had problems with the Main Street one. So the bottom line is my land use sense wants to keep retail. I am mindful of the testimony that we got with regard to the viability of retail. So once again, I'm torn, and I am very much looking forward to the input of the other council people, which is why I chose to speak first, so then I can listen to the rest of you.
Okay. I do have one clarification I'd like to ask of staff. There was a reference made to the previous tenant as in being in violation of the CUP. Is that correct?
Unfortunately, I'm not aware of the previous violation.
All right. Well, I don't think there's an assumption of a previous violation. I'm saying this was an approved use, the hybrid of retail and a small portion of salon, correct?
Correct, with specific floor plans attached so that the salon was in the rear of the commercial space and the retail was in the front.
All right, thank you. Other comments from council? Mr. Vice Mayor.
I was actually on the Planning Commission when this came the first time with the concept of the mixed use. And I struggled with it then, I struggle with it today, but I have been pretty consistent in my position that I think it's very important that we maintain the retail presence facing north and in this case South Santa Cruz Avenue. I'm not sure that the previous tenant actually followed through for very long with what the plan was, which was to have the entrance to the salon portion at the back and the entrance to the retail at the front. I drive by there weekly, and I watched it shift rather quickly because I was interested in what was happening there. My concern is that if we allow this to go more personal service, we have a significant issue with parking, and a chair, one additional chair is two parking spots, not counting overlap when somebody comes and waits. And to just write off retail for this location, which is in essence what I'm concerned that we could end up doing, I think it's problematic for me. I've been pretty consistent. I voted against the salon on Main Street. I voted against this having any salon use when I was on the Planning Commission. I'm open to hearing my fellow council members. If there's a compelling argument to make a change here, I'll listen. I wanted you to be aware my first bias is I want to try and maintain retail here as best we can.
Councilmember Spector?
I was going to defer to Mr. Leonardis, but his hand wasn't up. Thank you. Another issue of concern to me is the domino. I mean, you have one location that's retail, and then you allow it to become half personal service, and then you allow that to become 100% personal service, and then you have my Orchids Place go away, and then you move personal service there under the argument that you can't support retail because there's no other retail to support it. So again, I continue to have these concerns, and I heard Mr. Rice, and I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of you.
Mr. Leonardis, you want to speak?
Mr. Mayor. You know, one of my concerns about this is it doesn't fit the general plan, and I don't believe that the Planning Commission erred in their decision. I agree with the comments made by the previous two council members. And, you know, I drove by there today, took a look at some of the surrounding salons, and there's quite a few of them. And there's a lot of empty chairs already. And if we allowed for 3 more chairs, you say, well, it's only 3 chairs, and it could help Mr. Astani's business, and I'm sympathetic towards that. But I just wonder about the long-term viability, the saturation of chairs in Los Gatos, and I'm just, you know, concerned about the future. I think this could be just prolonging more agony.
Thank you. We have 2 issues I think we need to deal with. One is the question of the saturation of personal service businesses in the downtown. And this is an overriding concern that we have maintained for a goodly period of time, right from the point of our needing as a council to place a moratorium on new personal service businesses in the Central Business District, because we saw that they were coming in and eating up all vacant spaces. And after that moratorium, then we went to the conditional use permit as our ability to make some control. But the issue really is, okay, at what point are we saturated? The staff report that was on the desk with the revision of the personal service map shows us a good spread of different personal services. Obviously, the bulk of them are on Village Lane. Looks like they probably are butting right up against each other, all up and down Village Lane. But that was an area that was considered open to personal service businesses. As you move further down North Santa Cruz towards South Santa Cruz, you notice that there was some reduction in the middle of that area until you get to almost Main Street, and then we have another increase. I think it's important that we keep in mind that that's the first item of business, that is the saturation of personal service. We are very dedicated to an extraordinary mix of uses in the downtown, including personal service, but also the balance of independent to formula retail. And when we made the policy that said that we would have a balance of 80 to 20, 80% independent, 20% formula or corporate, we've been able to maintain that number, and I think that's why the downtown is so viable. In contrast to some other cities in our area that are either all in small businesses or all restaurant, and we see what happens to them. Those are called ghost towns. And one is a neighbor, not too far to the north. Another is a little further north, but very similar to us in demographics, but not able to make a downtown mix work. I think we've done a really good job of that, and so it's really important that we continue to maintain that as a focus. The other issue is then the question of and it segues from my last comment, the question of maintaining or achieving sufficient retail space. So again, we keep that mix that allows us to have a thriving downtown. And my question, and I think it's already been asked and answered, but my curiosity is why does the traffic stop just south of Willow Street when you have so much traffic at Willow Street, when it is such a thriving restaurant use, and then it stops apparently? There are only a couple of reasons I can ascertain, because it's not vacant from Main Street all the way down to Broadway. It's not. There is a lot of activity and a lot of traffic generated by those restaurant uses in that area. And what keeps people from going south? I don't know. I guess you could say, well, you just can't make it. You have to have personal service business south of Willow Street. Or you could say it's the wrong tenants. It's the wrong tenants. And I think that that's the responsibility of the property owner, to make sure that he or she selects the appropriate tenants, the ones that are going to make this thing happen. For all intents and purposes, it would seem to me that would be the goal. I am concerned, and I believe Mr. Leonardis hinted at it, that I think it was perhaps Mr. Leonardis or Councilmember Spector hinted at the fact that we're saying, if we were to approve this, that the only use that would be viable would be personal service, and that would be it. And so we would be dedicating the rest of South Santa Cruz from Willow Street to Broadway, at least to that point, as personal service only. And my inclination is to question that as an outcome. So that is my comment for Councilmember Spector, since she's trying to observe what we're all saying tonight. And I wonder if there's a motion. And by the way, before we make a motion, I just want to let you know that with only 4 people in council tonight, then a split vote, 2-2, means that the motion fails, or that whatever is being determined would fail at that point. So a 2-2 split means a failed termination. Okay. So any other comments before we go to a motion? Is anyone willing or interested in making a motion? I believe the Vice Mayor wants to.
I guess I will. I'm going to move that we uphold the Planning Commission's decision denying conditional use permit U10-013
It's been moved to uphold the Planning Commission's decision. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Councilmember Leonardis seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. The Planning Commission is upheld. Any other comments? Yes, Vice Mayor.
I think we need a second motion on the resolution. So I'm going to move that we adopt the resolution denying the appeal of the Planning Commission decision to add the 3 stations as specified in attachment 2.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Councilmember Leonardis seconds it. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. We're now moving on to item 9. Item 9 is a conditional use permit, U10-019, architecture and site application S10-044. It's for the project at 316 North Santa Cruz Avenue, known as Pedro's. The property owner is Peter Rizzio, and the restaurant is represented by Mike DiPietro. Gentlemen, welcome. And you have 10 minutes to present, but before you do that, okay, you might as well sit down, okay? Because we have a staff report that we're gonna initiate this with, okay?
Had to get the blood going.
Yeah. Ms. Savage.
The applicant is requesting approval of a conditional use permit modification to allow outdoor seating and live entertainment, and approval of an architecture and site application to allow exterior modifications. The applicant is requesting 19 outdoor seats, 9 in a new proposed outdoor patio, and 10 in an existing entry courtyard. The outdoor seating will not increase the total number of seats currently allowed. The applicant will reconfigure the current seating arrangement. The applicant explains that the outdoor seating will allow the subject restaurant to compete with nearby restaurants with outdoor seating. Live entertainment is proposed to consist of live bands, salsa lessons, and comedy nights. The restaurant's existing hours of operation are Sunday 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. and Monday through Saturday from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. The applicant is proposing to exceed these hours during special events, fundraising events, and private events. Staff is concerned about the increased calls and demand in police services that may result from live entertainment after 10 p.m. If the council finds merit to allow music after 10 p.m., staff recommends condition number 9 in attachment 4 is revised to require the applicant to notify the police department if the restaurant intends to conduct an event. The project will provide outdoor seating in the downtown, where outdoor seating is encouraged through the general plan policies. The outdoor seating will require meal service with alcoholic beverage service as conditioned and will not increase the maximum number of seats allowed by the existing CUP. However, the proposed project will result in live entertainment when the alcoholic beverage policy allows entertainment only if standards and a permit process is adopted. Entertainment standards have not yet been adopted, and the council has the authority to review applications on a case-by-case basis to determine if a request beyond what the policy allows is appropriate. Last month, the Planning Commission considered the subject application. The Commission discussed the request, the limitations of the alcoholic beverage policy regarding live entertainment, and considered the Council's position on the alcoholic beverage policy for the recently approved conditional use permit with live entertainment located at 15.5 North Santa Cruz Avenue. The Commission recommended approval of the conditional use permit in consideration of the Town Council's recent approval for that live entertainment. The Council's decision for 15.5 North Santa Cruz was based on the fact that a live entertainment policy would be completed in the near future, and that several security conditions were required to mitigate potential impacts, including a condition allowing the police chief and the community development director the ability to suspend the use of live entertainment. The Commission's recommendation included conditions to place outdoor furnishings indoors before closing, cease live entertainment at 10 p.m. except for the requested special events, and cease use of outdoor seating at 10 p.m. The Planning Commission raised concerns about the architecture and site application for the proposed exterior alterations, but did ultimately recommend approval with the condition that those modifications are revised to the satisfaction of the Director of Community Development and the town's architectural consultant. The recommended conditions for the conditional use permit and the architecture and site application are included in the recommended conditions of approval included with your staff report. This concludes staff presentation. Staff is available for any questions.
Questions of staff? All right, I'll do a very quick preface here. In reading the Planning Commission's minutes, I know that there was some degree of confusion. I know it was a late hour as well, but I think that one of the issues that I will be talking to when we have our discussion is the nexus between 15 South Santa Cruz, 15 and a half South Santa Cruz, and this property, because we were so adamant as a council in the number of restrictions and parameters we put on that particular approval, and it was not intended to be in any way, shape, or form an application that demonstrated the process would likely or logically be able to be applied in other cases. So that was one issue that I wanted to bring up at the beginning, and I think that in some ways moved the Planning Commission to their decision, because of the fact that we were not setting precedent down there at 15 and a half North Santa Cruz, and that we probably are continuing to evaluate how effective our rules and restrictions were, and we will continue to do that. So that to me is an issue that I need to get on the table. Any other questions for staff at this point? Mr. Leonardis?
I noticed from the Planning Commission meeting there was some talk about the chimney and whether that was going to stay, or if we're just looking at the plans in the book here this evening.
Is there a comment to that?
The architecture and site application could be approved at staff level, but as mentioned in the staff report, staff did want the application to be kept with the conditional use permit so that the applications weren't bifurcated as they were related. The exterior modifications allow the new proposed outdoor patio. The Planning Commission specifically recommended approval of that, and their recommendation was to Town Council. Town Council has the option of approving the architecture and site application with the Planning Commission's recommended additional condition. If they felt they wanted to take action on it tonight, they could, but the Planning Commission did recommend that the modifications are approved subject to additional review by the Community Development Department and the town's architectural consultant.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff? We're going to go to the public portion now, and just want to remind you, we do need those cards filled out so that, okay, very good. I'm sure they'll be brought to my attention very shortly if you want to vamp for a while while I get these. Thank you. We will have 10 minutes for this portion, and we have Mike DiPietro and Kurt Anderson, and the 10 minutes can be divided however you wish, and then you'll get 5 minutes to rebut yourself at that point if you need. But we have no other cards, so is there anyone who would like to speak to this? If you do so wish, would you bring forth one of those buff cards? Okay, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Kurt Anderson, principal of Anderson Architects, and this is Mike DiPietro. He is vice president of Pedro's Restaurant. First off, we want to extend our appreciation to staff. They did a great job with us working on the application. We were very diligent in getting back and forth to us so we could go through a timely process with these two applications. I'd like to make a couple comments. In regards to the architectural piece and the chimney, the council, Leonardis' comments, we've looked at that since we've had that meeting, and we are not going to be able to save that chimney because there's not enough room on each side of the chimney to get outside of the patio. So we've actually made a couple design suggestions that we've sent to staff, and we agreed that we would hold that aside at this point in time and work with staff after we got through this process. So we already are looking at coming up with a solution that'll meet the intent of the commission. We've reviewed all of the conditions that are in front of the council tonight. We find them acceptable, and we do recognize that there is, as you're talking about, the nexus between us and Los Gatos Bar and Grill. Entirely two different applications, two different locations. We're much more in a commercial area than the Los Gatos Bar and Grill. We have here tonight to present, we did some community outreach. We have got, and I'll give these to the clerk, we have got over 110 signatures from people that are patrons of the restaurant in support of the application. Mike, could you enter those over there, please? We have got, we have 24 signed letters of support from adjacent business owners on Santa Cruz Avenue and also Village Lane, from basically from Bachman to Highway 9. And we have additional 25 email letters of support also that we've reached out to the community. So I'm going to, at this point in time, I'm going to sit back and have any questions from architectural side. If not, then I'm going to turn you over to Mike and let him talk to you about the entertainment side.
Okay, why don't we let Mike talk first, and then questions can be directed to either of you.
Great. Good evening. My name is Mike DiPietro, and I'm the Vice President of Golden State Restaurants, Inc. So the reason why I'm here is obviously for the entertainment portion and the remodel of the restaurant. I was hired back in March by the management team to take a look at the restaurants that they own, one of which was Los Gatos Pedro's. And being self-employed my whole life, what can I do to help them out with that particular restaurant? And as we all know, that restaurant's been around for a long time and has just been untouched. It's been kind of like a dormant investment for them. So my project was to come up with ideas that would help increase the volume and the profitability of that particular restaurant. So this is where I have to apologize to the council, because I brought in music to Pedro's for about 3 months, and it was a outstanding success from a volume building perspective and a profit building perspective. I did not know I wasn't supposed to have music until I got noticed by the town code enforcement that I was in violation. So I immediately stopped it. I had paid for some bands, so I wanted to finish that, but as soon as those bands were paid, I actually stopped all the music. So I want to apologize for doing that without permission. I did not know I needed permission to do that. So the remodel to me is very important. The entertainment one is extremely important because we've had such tremendous support from the patrons. What is important to me to let the council know is Pedro's is a family restaurant. It's not going to change being a family restaurant. The bands that I brought in were bands like Kurt's band that plays at the Toll House. The crowd that we were going after really is the families. We noticed a lot on Thursday and Friday nights that when the bands were playing from 5:30 to 8:30, these weren't from 5 to 10. We started at 5:30 to 8:30. That the moms and the dads and the kids, after eating dinner, would go in the palm room, as we call it, and they would be dancing to the music. We purposely did not have music past 10 o'clock on Saturday night, 10 o'clock on some Friday nights, but 5:30 to 8:30 was really our plan. I do not want to turn it into a nightclub. It will never be a nightclub. It will always be a family restaurant. The success of the business, in my opinion, will be part of this entertainment permit. There's a lot of competition in Los Gatos. We've hired a 1-star Michelin chef to come in and redo the menu, which we're working on right now. So I really believe without this opportunity and given the competition, it'd be difficult for us to stay competitive in Los Gatos. Thank you.
All right. Anything further? You still have a few more minutes, Mr. Anderson. Nothing further? All right. I have no cards, and I don't see anyone jumping up to give us one, so I'm going to assume that there's no one else to speak. So I'd like to ask the council if they would like to ask the applicant questions. Councilwoman Spector?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the Planning Commission, we have the transcript, so we were able to read everything that all of you said there. You made a statement, and you sort of made the same one here, that you want the DJ and live music and dancing to make Pedro's more competitive. Now, there are a number of restaurants in that North Santa Cruz area, and fairly close to where you are located. Why do you feel as though it's the DJ and live music and dancing that will make you competitive with these surrounding restaurants?
When I put the music in, it was an experiment. The experiment happened to work very, very well. I was astounded at the amount of dollars, not only in beverage sales, but in food sales that came out of having the bands. And just by that happening, because we monitor it every single night, that brought Pedro's from a old tired brand, if you will, to it became probably some talk of the town. I still get every day in Pedro's phone calls from people asking, when is the music coming back? When are you going to bring salsa lessons back? Are you going to start comedy night? So just from an experiment, it proved to be very profitable for the restaurant. So when I say competitive, it puts me more competitive, probably, than some of the other restaurants that don't have room or can't accommodate live music.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Well, perhaps we'll have more after your rebuttal. Okay, you have 5 minutes to rebut whatever you said already. Is there any interest in doing that? Mr. Anderson, I assume you want to rebut what Mr. DiPietro said?
So this is a little touch of our comedy night that we're going to have at Pedro's. No, just kidding. We just really want to, again, extend our appreciation to staff. We really feel, as Mike was saying, I mean, I've been in this area a long time. I've been practicing architecture in this area since 1975. Pedro's is a tired brand, and this is going to inject some new life, and it creates some excitement, some activity, and as Ron Tate was saying earlier, you got to have a certain amount of synergy to make things happen. And one of the wonderful things about Los Gatos downtown is that there is a variety of things, places to eat. Forbes Mill, Randall, Double D's, the new place coming and going across the street, Opa's, on and on. It really creates a viable. You go downtown Los Gatos now in the evening, and it's fun. There's stuff, people walking around. It helps the retail. It's all very important, a part of making it a very thriving downtown and making it vibrant. And the addition of the patio outside, that'll create some additional, more visual excitement on the street. The music is not going to be a 10 to 1 a.m. type situation. It is going to stop 10 o'clock at the latest, except on special events. And it really will make Pedro's come alive again. And the addition of the patio and the changes we're going to make inside at the bar and the restrooms, because we're going to upgrade all those for accessibility, it's just really going to put some life back into this institution of Los Gatos, and it will help it to maintain it being successful. And I really feel it, and we do a lot of restaurants. I really feel it's going to make a huge difference for them from a pride of ownership, pride to staff, how they feel about working there, and the fact that the experience that the patrons and the town of Los Gatos will be able to experience when they go there. So I think it's really respectfully requested the council consider this, give us our blessing. We agree to all the conditions. We want to go on record that when the entertainment policy gets into effect, if there's changes that we have to make to correspond to that retroactively, we'll go on record. We will do that. Just as Los Gatos Bar and Grill have committed, we will do the same thing. We want to be a very important part of this community and continue to help the tax base.
Okay. Mr. DiPietro, you want to say something more?
I have 2 minutes.
Yeah, you do.
I don't mean to use it all, but just one point. We didn't do this application solely based on what happened with Los Gatos Bar and Grill. We're not Los Gatos Bar and Grill. We don't want to be a Los Gatos Bar and Grill. We don't have this. We don't have the clients at Los Gatos Bar and Grill. We have become. The time we did the music, it was kind of known as the over 50 crowd, and that's the kind of crowd we have that come in and listen to the music. A lot of them are single, a lot of them are married, and they just find it a comfortable place to come where there's not a lot of 20-year-olds running around. It's a much older crowd, a smaller venue, more intimate venue. So I just want the council to know that there's no intention here of hiring bands that we're going to get the 25-year-old. That's just not who we're getting yet. The bands are, Kurt would know more than I would because he's in the music business more than me, but the bands we have hired, usually their average age is about 45 to 50 as musicians, and that's the crowd that we're getting. Thank you.
All right, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
You said to the Planning Commission that you did not intend this to be a nightclub or a club. And the uses you're proposing, live music or DJ, dancing, salsa, those are intended not to imitate a club, but rather to offer an opportunity for the families to have that kind of entertainment, okay? I guess I don't see the differentiation. How is it that by having what you're proposing, which changes the restaurant use in some way, how this actually makes you not by just practice into a club at that point? I have another question after that. Either of you is fine, okay.
Mr. Mayor, music selection, as you know, really drives the clientele. Types of music, the quality of the music, and the kind of music that my band and I play and the bands here appeals. It's a really broad section. I mean, we play from, say, Frank Sinatra to Ricky Martin, anything in between. And I cannot tell you how many times, we played there a couple times during that trial period, that we would have 3 or 4 kids this size out there dancing with us while we were playing, loving the music, having a great time, out there with the moms, out there with the dads, and they would just all have these great smiles on their face, and they leave. They really, and we'd sing to them and interact with them, and they really left there just feeling great. It was a wonderful experience for them. And so the kind of music and the kind of bands that Mike has selected in the past appeals to that broad spectrum. It's not hip hop. It's not rap. I mean, it's just really, like I said, a broad spectrum of very easy listening type of music. Almost think of it like a dinner show. It's not a club where people are standing around and just drinking. I mean, these people are eating, they're getting up, they dance with, sit back down and eat, they have something to eat, and then they leave and have a great time. So it's not where somebody goes and hangs out for 5 hours like they would at a club. It's not that environment. And I can tell you because I play there, I know what it's like. And that really drives how that whole feeling of that restaurant, and that it's the type of entertainment, the music that you provide. That drives everything. So if you keep it to that family selection, it's not going to be a nightclub.
Okay, I do have a question.
Can I add to
yeah, please.
If you don't mind. I guess my vision of a nightclub is 9 o'clock to 1:30 or 2 o'clock. That to me is a nightclub. I don't find Pedro's at all in that. I guess a nightclub's a nightclub. Definition's a definition, correct? I'm not going to. That's just a moot point to me. But it's the atmosphere that we're doing, that we're providing at Pedro's. It's lit up. It's not dark. We have all the lights on. It's not. You can see everybody. The music has to be kept at a level where if you're in the back of that restaurant at booth 11 and you're having dinner, you have to be able to have a conversation without raising your voice. And that's how we monitor the music. The management staff has been trained to walk back there every half hour at those booths and have a conversation with the customers. If they have to raise their voice, that music is to be turned down. So we don't have the music up loud. You don't even hear the music if the door's closed, walking by the restaurant. It's not this blowout, loud, all night long type of venue.
Okay, the other question I had was an experience on Saturday night, because I decided to go down and take a look at the architectural piece on the corner that was going to be eliminated. And I heard the music. And there was a live band. And there was dancing. And I heard it from outside. The doors are closed. And I'm just curious because this was subsequent to the Planning Commission and subsequent to the obvious awareness that we demanded permitting for this kind of thing. And it was a mixed crowd. There were some more senior members of the community dancing, and there were some younger people, some 20s something. And the music stopped about 10 after 10. Any thoughts about that?
It wasn't supposed to happen at all. If the information I was given was correct, in the back of the restaurant there, in the fountain room, there was a large party there, and she had requested live music, and the manager at the time, Jonathan, a young guy, he knows what we're doing, but he doesn't know the restrictions, so he booked the band. That's the band she requested, and it was there. And I heard about it this morning, and I can't tell you what I did, but it was not by my permission. I had no idea it was even going to happen. I'm in charge of a bunch of restaurants, so this isn't my only responsibility, although this is my pet project that I would like to see through. But that was not authorized by me at all. It was done by, well,
Somebody
ignorance,
else.
I guess. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilwoman Spector.
Thank you. So I'm curious now, you were previously testifying that you were made aware by the town of the violation of having live music, and you got a citation or something to that effect, and then you didn't do it anymore because you came to get a permit. But now you're telling us that when you were making those statements, you knew that there was this violation on Saturday, but you didn't share that with us. In my mind, you kept that from us. Is there some reason?
Absolutely oversight, not done purposely at all. I'm not a public speaker. I made my notes, of which there is a note of that down there. I didn't read it. I'm not trying to hide anything from the council. Council does need to know that this young man was part of, after the council, we asked Jennifer, there was another private party, and it was New Year's Eve, and we asked if we can have a DJ, and it was allowed to have a DJ. So Jonathan thought, okay, it's okay to have this music, and he booked the band. Again, it wasn't by me.
All right. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. On your plans, you've got the drawings for the revamping or remodeling of the bathroom areas, and it says it's going to be done under a separate permit. Is it your intention to do all the work at once, or are you going to phase this?
All at once.
All at once. And you wouldn't have a problem if it was conditioned to that effect?
Oh, no.
No, no.
Okay.
No, no.
Thank you.
We would actually prefer that.
Any other comments or questions? I have another question. In the discussion with the Planning Commission, there was some dialogue about the concerns the police chief had with the proximity to the sidewalk and the access to the bar. And the Planning Commission made a determination that there would have to be food served on the patio if there's alcohol being consumed, and that at 10 o'clock that would cease.
Correct.
Okay. If I understood the application, the purpose is to actually expand the bar. Is that not correct? That seems to me, as I'm looking at this, and from the discussion you had with the Planning Commission, it was stated pretty clearly that the bar is too dark. It needs to be opened up. You need to be able to allow people to access more readily. I spent a lot of time in Pedro's, actually, and I am aware of the improvements that have been made, not only to the decor but also to the menu. And so your choice of a chef, I think, was a wise choice, because it has definitely been an enhanced experience. But when I saw the application, it really was focused on the bar and providing some outdoor seating. So the question is, let's talk about this issue of the risk we take with alcohol being served out there, that in that close proximity to the sidewalk. The sidewalk's a very narrow sidewalk at that point. It's not like the sidewalk down at Forbes Mill, which is set back, so that their outdoor dining is quite a bit more removed. Yours is right on the sidewalk. There was some comment in the report that said that with certain security measures, someone there watching this, then it might be possible to see a mitigation of the risk. But I think we all know that it's very difficult for us as an agency and for our police department to be able to do that kind of security for every outdoor dining experience. So would you talk about how you see this question of securing that space so that, first of all, food is being served, and secondly, that alcohol is not being distributed to the folks on the sidewalk?
First and foremost, it'll be all management staff and bar staff and waitresses will be trained with the understanding that they cannot have somebody sit on that patio without food. And when food, it's not just chips and salsa. Mm-hmm. It's not guacamole and chips. It has to
Our
be,
definition says that as well.
It has to be an entree of some sort. So before they sit out there, the question is going to be asked, are you going to have food? The answer has to be yes, and we have to have food out there. I mean, all we can do and what we are going to do is train staff to make sure that whoever sits on that patio, they have to have entrees served with them. If by some reason someone's out there and there's chips and salsa and they're having a margarita, they have to be asked to come in, and we will do that.
Okay, another comment or question?
Mr. Mayor, let me ask. That condition or that comment came up during the commission stuff, and I've given some thought to that architecturally, how we could deal with that. And that's part of the things I work out with staff and the architectural consultant. I'm thinking that we might make a minor change and actually put a planter between the sidewalk and our fence, creating a little further depth away from that sidewalk to our eating area, making it more difficult to be able to do that. So if we can get another couple feet there, then it's going to be very obvious when somebody's doing that, and that will help the staff be able to better police that area, so to speak, and make sure none of that happens. Mm-hmm. So we'll do our best we can from a physical standpoint to ensure that that is completely mitigated.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Can I ask a question? Please. When I walk by Forbes Mill, and I could be wrong, maybe you can help me here, but the sidewalk's right there, but then right next to the sidewalk they have a railing, and then on their side of the railing is their tables. Ours seems to me to be exactly the same way. Is there a difference that I'm not seeing?
The only difference I would say, and I'll ask you to answer that, but the only difference I see is that their bar is separated from the outdoor dining. It's not immediately adjacent. That the bar area is inside as you come in to the waiting area, and then if you choose to sit at an outdoor table, then you are escorted out to your table as it's available. So it's definitely a meal service, and it's not connected to the bar. That would be my differentiation.
That's what I was going to say.
Okay.
Same thing.
Okay. So do you think that we're making the bar bigger? Because we're not. The bar where it is staying where it is. We're not adding.
I'm not questioning the bar itself.
Okay.
I'm questioning, when I say bar, I'm talking about where the liquor is being served.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Let's just make it clear, Mr. Mayor, we are not adding any additional seats.
Correct.
All we're basically doing is, because those seats that are in front of the fireplace on the inside, those are going to go away because you got to have access downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically going to be
Right.
just an exchange.
I'm curious, just curious. The 10 seats that are sitting in the little foyer right now, were those taken from inside the restaurant, or were those additions? Okay, so those are, you displaced some seats inside.
That's correct.
Okay. Have you been serving outside there?
Just food, no alcohol.
Okay. And since I feel like I'm dominating this part of the discussion, I apologize, but I believe it was Planning Commissioner Erickson who talked about the side of your business south of the entrance, where, I call it the deck. When we go out there and we want to sit, we say, is there space on the deck? Okay? And the girls seem to know what we're talking about. I know those windows open, and during the summer, they're typically open. And I think that provides some experience of outdoor dining. I mean, that's my sense. How do you consider it?
Same way. I mean, before I got there, they would not open those windows at all. Those windows supposedly were staying shut. When I got there, it was like 80 degrees outside, the sun's out, said open the windows and let the fresh air in. And so we do that. We don't open them all the way. We open them up just enough to get the air in there. So is that outside seating? 50-50.
Okay.
Really.
Thank you. You answered the question. Other questions from council? I see none. So now, gentlemen, you can sit down, okay? And I would open the council for discussion and or a motion. And just a reminder, as I said in the previous application, that with a 4-person council, if it's a 2-2 split, then what will happen is the motion will be denied. Okay? So, who would like to start? The vice mayor has indicated that he would not. So, anyone else wish to add a piece to this discussion or make a motion? Councilmember Spector.
Since the vice mayor doesn't want to say anything at this juncture. Okay, I'm going to put aside for the time being the information that we got this evening with regard to the initial violations, the citation, and then the subsequent violations. That's all of concern to me, but from a land use perspective for the time being, I'm going to put that aside. From a land use perspective, I have a problem and an issue with approving applications that violate our current alcohol beverage policy. I have a problem using a future revision to that alcohol beverage policy as a condition of approval, as we did at 15.5 and as the Planning Commission did with this application. I have a problem with the actuality or appearance of having violating the alcohol beverage policy with regard to one application, then being the reason that a subsequent application is approved, i.e. 15.5 used for the approval of Pedro's. I have a problem with the fact that not only are we violating the alcohol beverage policy, but we are now expanding it from a DJ to a DJ and live music and dancing and comedy night. Those uses become a part of the conditional use permit, and they run with the land. I'm going to listen to what everybody else says, but unlike the prior application, my feelings are more defined with regard to this one. I don't think that we should be violating the alcohol beverage policy with this application, and I certainly don't think that we should be expanding the challenges to that alcohol beverage policy as is being done here. I have real concerns about this application. And then, as I said, finding out what I just did this evening about the violations and subsequent violations only increase those concerns.
Thank you. Other comments? Councilman Leonardis?
I visited the restaurant today just to check it out, and I think some improvements would be very welcome. I like the design, I like the patio, and I like the idea of bringing some live entertainment down there to liven it up a little bit. And it ends at 10 p.m., so it's not going to be going till 1:30 in the morning. And I like the fact that you're offering something different, salsa dancing and stand-up comedians. I think it's not a nightclub environment based on some of the comments we heard earlier, where it's more like a 9 o'clock to 1 o'clock thing, and it's strictly drinking. This is a family restaurant, and I I like what I see in that regard.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Rice.
This is tough. The mayor actually brought up an interesting point that I had noticed as well, where when you asked about, is this an expansion of the bar, it feels like it. I know it's not, but it feels like it because the scope of work is in an area that's currently the bar. I don't want to restrict a business owner from doing what they need to do to be successful when it's essentially the same use. And I also don't think it's fair for a business owner to be penalized because we haven't gotten our act together, so to speak, to do what we've said we're going to do for the last 2 years that I've been on council of updating our entertainment and alcohol policy. It's not an ideal situation to say, okay, we're going to allow you to do this, but if we change our minds down the road in our policy, you're going to be bound by that. The fact that the applicant is willing to do that is admirable, and I appreciate that, because ultimately, whatever gets changed, we have to live with, and we all have to, or the majority of us have to agree on. I'm open to the redesign. I like what I see as well. I think the restaurant is a little tired architecturally, and I trust that our staff and our consulting architect can finalize the tweaks that you talk about wanting to do. I'm open to this as a possibility, and I'll listen to my fellow council members.
Thank you. My comments probably are related to what I talked about earlier. I think there is an issue with noise. It's very close to a neighborhood, and the question of just the sounds of other restaurants that are outside, those have been brought to our attention by neighbors. You include music in this, and then that exacerbates the problem. I think in addition to that, we've got a question of an open space where once we have gone with our new design for the outdoor dining, that's fairly open to the rest of the restaurant. And therefore it would, to me, funnel the noise outside, funnel the music outside the restaurant, and not contain it within. And I think that's a major issue. Because it is so proximate to the neighborhood. The parking down on that side of North Santa Cruz is very restricted. It seems like it's very difficult to find viable parking there in the evening in particular. And because of that, then people have to go hunt for parking, which means that there will be more generation of traffic if you indeed are more successful. What I'm looking at right now is a level of discomfort with including this entertainment component because, as was stated before, and I believe it was Councilwoman Spector asked the question, to remain competitive, who are the other competitors? No one else at that section of town, any restaurant, has entertainment as far as I know. It's all situated on Main Street in North Santa Cruz or down number 1 Broadway at South Santa Cruz. And again, we restricted our approval of 15.5 very rigidly because we were given some assurances that the amount of security, the type of operation, the enclosure of the music inside the building itself, nothing out on the deck, was going to assure that there would not be a reverberation throughout the rest of the neighborhood. And that neighborhood is removed much further than the neighborhood that you're looking at, Almendra and Bachman and those streets in between. I think you're a family restaurant, and I think that the idea that this is needed, that is, the entertainment component is needed to enhance your ability to be competitive and viable and create volume, probably would do that. I also believe that, your menu and the ambiance of the restaurant and your the efficiency of your wait staff, those would all go a long ways also to making a viable business if the business is not as viable as it should be. I think that you are a restaurant, and I think that should be the emphasis, that should be the direction of travel. I'm not inclined to, without seeing an evaluation by our consulting architect, I'm not inclined to change that corner of the building. I think it does add character. I believe it was Commissioner Telesfor who first brought that up in the commission discussion, that there's a concern about losing that. There were also concerns about the window treatments, and that you were proposing along Petticoat, to change the feeling of the bar so that you could actually see activity inside the bar. I think the whole issue of the architecture is I'm not comfortable with the changes as proposed. I'm not comfortable changing something that I do think is appropriate. There's also another question that I think we need to raise. I'm going to ask the attorney if she would be willing to comment to this. The original CUP for Pedro's occurred at a certain point prior to our relatively new conditions of approval for restaurants, and that the conditions of approval that are more contemporary did restrict service of alcohol to food service, and that's what you're responding to when that question has raised itself. But I'd ask the attorney, I believe there's some question about the current CUP and bringing this up to current standards, because we have, as far as I understand, no particular restriction on the use of alcohol with food in the old CUP. Would anyone like to talk to that issue, please?
I'll let our planner, Ms. Savage, address that first.
So you are correct in that our older conditional use permits weren't as detailed as our more recent conditional use permits. The most recent conditional use permit for this space was a 1994 conditional use permit, and that conditional use permit has 3 conditions. The second one allows alcoholic beverage service. The third one limits the number of seats to 249. And the first one includes the 5 provisions that the alcoholic beverage policy requires, having taxi numbers available, meeting with the police department if necessary. There's no record of us ever limiting the alcoholic beverage service with or without meals. However, a architecture and site application that expanded the restaurant into the size that it is today did clearly show in the plans a lounge and bar area, and in the staff report it also has a description of the lounge and bar area.
So what does that mean for the restriction that we currently impose on all restaurants who serve alcohol? Because if this was 98, when this 94. We evolved to a new restaurant CUP generally, and at this point in time, since the CUP has been opened by the application, we could impose the current language. Is that not correct?
That is correct, and there is a conditional use permit in the recommended conditions of approval that include that language. And for this particular use, it allows them to keep the bar use as a so-called separate bar, in that meal service is not required at the bar.
Okay. Thank you. Now, and you say in the conditions, and I read that in the conditions, if we do nothing tonight, can that be determined as what our expectation is? Madam Attorney?
Tonight, For the, before you is a request for a conditional use permit, the modification, with recommended hours of operation, expansion of operation, as well as the architectural and site. Because the conditional use permit is before you, this council can make motions regarding conditions on that existing permit.
Okay, Mr. Manager.
Yes, and if I might add one additional clarification that Ms. Savage pointed out to me just prior to the meeting. We do have in the town code a conditional use modification where if anybody with the conditional use permit intensifies the use, that allows the town to take action to revoke that use, that intensified use. So if the council were to not take any action tonight or on the applicant's request before you, and the applicant were to change the use of the property from its current state based on the 1998 approval of the site, of the lounge and the restaurant area, that would be an intensification of use that would, the town could take appropriate action on.
Okay, so if there is no change, then the previous language stays intact. Is that correct? If there's actually no decision to move any part of this conditional use permit forward, then the old language is active. Okay. Right. Any other comments from council? No.
Can you reopen the public hearing?
I can't reopen the hearing right now. I could, but I need to hear from council first, please.
So, Mr. Mayor.
Please.
As it stands, the existing alcohol policy is more lenient than if they got this new CUP. Is that correct? In the sense where you do not have to have food at the bar with your... Is that
That's my understanding.
That's the understanding. Okay.
Would you care?
The existing CUP would be more lenient in that sense, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
In the sense that people could drink at the bar without food or drink anywhere without food, lenient in one sense. I didn't pick that up.
Right. The current CUP doesn't have the restriction that our more recent CUPs have, whereby you have to have meal service. So the current CUP would allow the consumption of alcoholic beverages at any location in the restaurant without meal service.
Okay. I have a problem with that. Okay. I mean, it's obvious that we made changes to our conditional use permit process at a certain point in time because we were attempting to control particularly standalone bars and the use of alcohol without meals. Now, I need to ask whether or not there can be, since the CUP has been opened, can we approve something, if we decide that we are going to so do, something that would include that restriction? Is that possible?
If I could just make sure I understand the question, you're asking if you could include that restriction today, even without approving the request, is that correct?
Since the CUP has been opened, yes.
And
that's correct.
Okay. Councilwoman Spector.
This is a hypothetical question having to do with this CUP. Let's say that the applicant is requesting 7 things in this conditional use permit, and let's say that we agree to one of those 7 things, but then can we add, in addition to that one thing that we're approving or moving to approve, the food with alcohol condition?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? I'm looking for a motion then, okay? And you notice that we have a number of motions. One is to approve the CUP and ANS as was recommended by the commission, but remember the commission was just advisory in this case. It was not, it was giving us some notion of what they felt could happen. And then to adopt the resolution requesting outdoor seating and live entertainment. And also the alternatives would then be to approve with conditions of approval modified or added, continue the project to a date certain with specific direction, remand to the planning commission with specific direction, or deny the application. Those are 4. Yes, Mr. Manager.
Sensing the council's discussion, I wanted to propose that using Exhibit A and the conditions therein may be a good sense of the council discussion that would then make it easier to get to a motion of which conditions would be included in a final action by the council requiring 3 votes to be acted upon. And my sense, based on the council's discussion so far, is items 1, 2, and 3 have not been of discussion. Item 4 has not been of discussion. Item 5, I've heard some discussion whether or not the outdoor seating should be expanded based on preference for the current design or not. So 5 might be one to get a sense of the council on. Number 6, there's been no requested change from the applicant or staff on that. Alcohol beverage service, this would be a condition that reflects what is our current standard for conditions on restaurants with alcohol service. Hours of operation would be a point of discussion of whether you want to allow the restaurant to go from its current hours, which is 10 p.m. on weeknights, 11 p.m. on weekends, to the hours specified in this condition. Entertainment, non-live entertainment to match that is number 9. Number 10 would be the live entertainment, which has been a discussion for council tonight. I would highlight that for condition 9, staff does have in the staff report a slight modification to what the Planning Commission sent to you, that if you were to include a condition 9 that allowed special events with music to a later point in time, that would be require 30 days prior notice to the police chief.
Now, I might ask, isn't that our standard right now? The 30 days notice for special events? For special events?
This type of special event would be different than the special event that's allowed once a year in town code outside of the zoning regulations.
All right.
So this would be on top of that.
Okay. Well, if I understood the manager correctly, there are a number of items that have been called into question.
7 through 10.
And so looking at that, I'm going to open it in a second, okay? In looking at that and the hours of operation, I think that perhaps we should have some discussion about those particular items. So who would like to make any comment? Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, staff, for a little bit of clarification. My focus at the moment is on condition 10, and I'm sensitive to the concerns of the neighborhood and the like, and I'm wondering if memory serves correctly, if we didn't do something, I want to say in Old Town, because of the neighbors, where we restricted entertainment to being non-amplified, and if that might be a solution, potential solution here. I'm not sure how you get around the DJ, because by definition that's kind of amplified, but I guess what I'm thinking is, with a lot of Mexican restaurants, you know, there's the guitar or a couple of guitar players, mariachis and the like, which I'm not sure would be a huge issue because they're non-amplified. And if that's the kind of thing that the applicant is after, I'm more amenable to that than a live band, so to speak, that has amplified music and electric guitars and that kind of thing. But so that's something that popped into my head as we were listening to staff and some of the issues there.
If I understand you correctly, then you would want to limit this to non-amplified, but you would be willing to include all of those other opportunities, the salsa lessons, the comedy nights, that kind of thing? Is that what you're talking about, Mr. Vice Mayor?
At the moment, I think that could work in my mind, as long as the volume does not affect the neighborhood. I do see a potential issue with, you know, a sliding glass door going open and closed with people sitting outside. That could cause a problem, especially if the volume is up. But I'm not sure if we get away from amplification, if that will be much of an issue.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Councilwoman Spector.
Thank you. This is the challenge with doing these applications, especially one as intense as this one, without reviewing the alcohol beverage policy first. That being said, the issue raised by the Vice Mayor with regard to Old Town, what that was a request by Old Town to have some, like a half a dozen performances during the summer, and ultimately that was approved with a ton of conditions, which include non-amplification, meetings with a neighborhood group before it happened, notification, and as it turned out, after that, maybe there were one or two, but no others. So it was not like a condition of approval of a CUP or anything of that ilk.
Councilman Leonardis.
If I may, just wanted to comment on the music, the aspect of the time. It will cease at 10 p.m., and maybe we could limit the hours. You know, it's hard to say if the music's inside the restaurant how loud it will be, if you'll hear it all the way, you know, down Almendra, over the traffic noise or whatever, if it's inside. But perhaps, you know, we can say music from 8 to 10. Just some thoughts.
If I can clarify something, I believe the request is that the hours of operation would be 10 to 11 Sunday through Thursday, and 10 to 1 Friday and Saturday, holidays, evenings before holidays. So they're not requesting a 10 o'clock stop.
I thought that I read that there was a 10 o'clock stop on all the live entertainment.
On all music, whether live or not, there'd be a 10 o'clock stop, correct, Jim?
So
It would be 10 o'clock unless you felt that there was merit to allow them to go till 12:30 a.m. during the 6 days specified in their letter.
So only during the special events it would go to 12:30.
Yes, and the applicants clarified to staff at the Planning Commission meeting that that is their intent, is to cease live entertainment at 10 p.m. except for those 6 specific days. The hours that are shown to go until 1 a.m. Were recommended by staff so that there would be an easier or less difficult enforcement issue with the hours of operation.
Councilwoman Spector.
Thank you. Question of staff, if I might. Is it your understanding that the applicants do want to go forward with the architecture and site, even if the CUP modifications, specifically with regard to live entertainment, are denied? I mean, are these separate concepts?
The outdoor seating is related to the exterior modifications. However, we haven't broached the topic of going forward with an alternative exterior modification if the outdoor seating is approved. So I do not know the answer to the main question.
But is entertainment separate from the architecture and site provisions?
Certainly, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments at this point? So, the recommendation was made by staff that they stay open from 10 to 1 on Fridays, Saturdays, holidays, etc.?
Correct.
And what was the purpose of that recommendation?
That was for an easier time to enforce hours of operation. We have a large number of establishments in the downtown, and for the police department to know the exact hours of operation for each establishment, it could become difficult. Now, staff is working with the police department to find an easier way of making that information available to the police officers in their vehicles. But it was a condition that staff felt that if there was merit in the project, it could make it a little bit easier to enforce. One thing to note is the applicant, first, the conditions have the include that music cease at 10 p.m., not that it go till 11, and that the applicant specifically are requesting just till 10 p.m. except for those 6 days where they would want to stop at 12:30.
Okay, and there was a comment in the staff report saying that those 6 days are beyond the scope of the days that we recognize for special events. Is that not correct?
Not for special events, but for holidays.
Holidays.
So the
It's not I.
Sorry. Gonna just try and talk over that. So the hours of operation that are allowed by the alcoholic beverage policy say that they can stay open until 1 on Fridays, Saturdays, holidays, and evenings before holidays. So if you were to approve those hours of operation until 1, the applicant wouldn't have to request special hours for those holidays. But unfortunately, the holidays that they're looking to celebrate, given the type of restaurant that they are, they're not defined as holidays in the town code. So if, for example, if Mexican Independence Day were to fall on a Tuesday, Mexican Independence Day is not defined as a holiday, and it would be a Tuesday where they would have to close at 11, so they would not be able to stay open until past that hour, which they may want to, considering it's a special event for their restaurant.
Not complicated at all, huh?
No.
Okay. Other comments from council or a motion? I'm not really comfortable with I'd like to address the staff here, if I might. I'm not really comfortable with this mix of issues that we're dealing with right now as we look at the CUP, and as Councilwoman Spector pointed out, this runs with the land. So it would seem to me that anyone who comes in after Pedro's, should Pedro's not be around, then all of these conditions would be applicable. And in effect, it says that now we're beginning to design from the dais, and that is not something that is really interesting or appropriate for the council. I'm going to allow a reopening of the public hearing because the applicant wishes to clarify some things for us. So, gentlemen, if you'd come back to the microphone. It's going to be very brief, so okay.
I'll be brief. A very important point. The fact that I wasn't supposed to have music and I did for over 3 months doesn't make it right. It was wrong. But I will tell you, in those 3 months, there wasn't one customer, there wasn't one residential complaint about the noise. The police department didn't come out and tell us the music was too loud. Nobody complained about that. We are very, very cognizant of that one issue. The idea of the sliding door being opened and closed, I have absolutely no issue whatsoever making it a policy that sliding door has to stay closed when there's music. It's not going to be that big of a deal to me if someone sits on that patio and eats while the music's playing. That's not going to make or break the entertainment side. I have to tell you, in 100% honesty here, that this music has made Pedro's a profitable restaurant. When I took it over, it was not profitable. This music has created a lot of buzz, a lot of excitement, a lot of hope for the restaurant. I've seen it in the numbers. I track the numbers when we have the music. It's an integral part of the business now. And it was meant as an experiment that turned out what we consider to be, I don't know, I guess a good experiment in a bad way, because we didn't have the permits. I would implore the council to consider the entertainment side of it. The 10 o'clock issue, we have music 5:30 to 8:30 on Thursday nights. I don't know who that upsets, because I think most people are awake at 8:30 at night. On Friday and Saturday night, we stop it at 10. I think most people in the neighborhood are up around 10 o'clock. And again, like I said, we haven't had one complaint from anybody about the music. On the contrary, we've had neighbors come and ask us when the music's coming back. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I've got to tell you, listening to deliberations and going back and forth in the times and this, I'm getting confused, and I know what this project is and what it's supposed to be. So I'm thinking with your permission, what I'd like to do is I'd like to continue this item. I'd like to get this thing very cleaned up so we're specifically what you're going to vote on. I'd like to look at the security issues. I'd like to look at the sound issues, see if I can come up so we can create some controls for sound, whether we go a triple pane window or double pane, self-closing door, we'll come up with some. I want to deal with the architectural issue. And I want to look at a couple things more in depth, and when we can come back to the council where we've got these specific programs to mitigate everybody's concern, and we've got to know exactly what you're going to vote on, what the times are, what days are, because it's very confusing. So I respectfully request the council to continue this item and let us get these resolved and work with staff and work with you and get this so we're all happy with these results so we can make it a very positive experience for the town.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I appreciate that. Any other comments from council? First of all, I need to ask the staff, have you heard what the issues are that we're concerned about? Some of the very convoluted concerns relative to the entertainment besides entertainment policy, the question of hours and the issue of number of days, the conformance to our current standards, because they do not want alcohol service in our restaurants without food being served as well. And I think that's been made very clear over the years by the council. I think the question of architecture needs to be addressed. We've got some mixed feelings about that. I think we need to confirm the security issues. We need to confirm what the concerns of the chief are relative to this. I'm still not convinced that in this particular location, entertainment is the appropriate use, but I'm interested in allowing the applicant to take another bite of the apple at this point in time. I tend not to want to continue this spin through the process, but at this moment in time, I think there are so many questions that the alternative to approval at this moment really would not be something that we could almost completely agree on in terms of the number of issues that in front of us. So with that in question, is there a member of council who would like to make a motion in this regard? And it can be any of the motions that are offered us. Mr. Vice Mayor.
Well, I guess the question is, are you looking for a motion to continue this to a date certain?
I think that would be appropriate, and I think that it would be appropriate. The Planning Commission has already given us an indication that they're willing to move forward with it. So I think this is a question of going back to staff and taking another run at this. And I know we're not coming back in the next 2 weeks, but we need to take a look at what is on our calendar for the next couple of months and see where we can go with this. Mr. Manager.
If the council is interested in a continuance, I would ask that you give discretion to staff to schedule which council meeting in consultation with the mayor.
All right, I would appreciate that.
So if there were to be a continuance to a council meeting to be set in March or April.
I'm fine with that, and I'll make that motion.
Okay. It's been moved to continue this application to a date uncertain, but to be determined. No.
We did just check in. We could do the second meeting of March, which would preclude the renoticing requirement because it would be a continuation. To
Second meeting in March would be the recommendation, so it would be a date certain.
Then I'll amend my motion.
All right.
To the meeting of March the 21st.
Okay, March 21st is the date. The motion is to continue with advisement from staff and working through the conflicts that we've observed.
I will second with the question for the mayor or staff. This second and continuing it to whatever March, that leaves the whole thing open. And let's say, for example, I'm seconding it even though I know that the live music component isn't something that I feel I can support. Is it the staff and mayor's concept that we just let the whole thing go forward in any event?
Well, if you mean that the whole thing gets approved no matter what comes back to us.
The application in its totality goes back to the staff.
I believe that's what the maker of the motion intended.
That was my intent.
All right, that's fine.
All right. So we have a motion and a second, and I think we understand what the motion is. Again, a 2-2 split means the motion fails, okay? All in favor of the motion to continue indicate aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. We'll see you in March. Okay?
And Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
We will continue to review the March 21st date with the mayor, just so if the council's aware, the mayor does have prerogative under your rules of order that if that agenda is too full in consultation with the applicant, we'd schedule it for a different night and have to re-advertise. But if we're able to keep it on the 21st, we won't have to re-notice. And then in response to Councilwoman Spector's question, staff will try to flag the issues that received the most council discussion tonight with a presentation of the options that you discussed.
Thank you very much. That brings us back to item 5, which is the motion or the request to adopt a resolution authorizing the manager to execute an agreement with RRM Design Groups as consultant for the North 40 specific plan. And this item was pulled, I believe, by Councilwoman Spector. Okay? Staff, you want to make comment before we have our discussion on this?
Given this was a pulled item from the consent calendar by council, we'll just respond to questions the council has.
Very good. Thank you. Councilwoman Spector.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In reading the staff's report and the staff's request, at the bottom of page 1, it states, the conceptual design calls for 2- and 3-story buildings with limited exceptions of 4- or possibly 5-story buildings for the hotel. As I read that, what I understood is that the specific plan that this consultant would be preparing could include, for example, 4- or 5-story buildings for the hotel. The challenge I had with that, or the problem I had with that, is when the North 40 was before the General Plan Advisory Committee, and it wasn't, we didn't have a lot of time to consider it. However, the feelings at the General Plan Advisory Committee were strong. And this issue of a 4- or 5-story hotel was not something that the General Plan Advisory Committee recommended and sent on to the Planning Commission. And in our general plan, which did come before the Planning Commission, was approved by it, and did come before the Town Council and was approved by it, we have provided for an overlay designation for the North 40 on page LU 18, and for a development of a North 40 plan on LU 30. Consistent with my recollection of GPAC, the Planning Commission, and the General Plan, I didn't see a provision for 4 or possibly 5-story buildings for the hotel. I am mindful of the fact that the proposed purchaser or a developer of this property has always wanted a 4 or 5-story hotel, but I do not recall it ever being anything that was approved by our Planning Commission and Town Council, and so I was concerned about having that provision in a future plan.
I would like to segue off of Councilwoman Spector's comments, because I had the same issue. Probably it's because we were on the GPAC, and we actually saw the original proposal. We know that the language of the proposal that included 750 dwelling units, 580,000 square feet of non-residential use, those were considered ceilings, not targets, in effect, and that for purposes of the EIR, for the general plan approval, that we needed to have those kinds of specifics. So there was discussion about that on the GPAC, but it wasn't, it was seen as the context of these numbers are not the numbers that we intend to achieve out there, but numbers that we can use to develop the general plan, EIR, and at that point in time, then the discussion also ensued regarding the height of buildings on the North 40, and I do believe that the 4 to 5 story hotel was indicated in the original discussion, but I also am in agreement with Councilwoman Spector that at a certain point it was removed, and I reference back to the general plan that had on pages LU 18 and 19 a number of different bullets, or in this case diamonds, that were focusing on the overlay designation for the North 40, and excluded from that list, although it was included initially in that list, excluded from that list was the question of the 4 or 5 story hotel. A couple of other things were excluded as well. So, and my assumption is that the General Plan Advisory Committee determined that wasn't something that we were going to include, and the Planning Commission then took that and recommended what we see in front of us here on these 2 pages of the general plan, which excluded, and then the council approved that exclusion. So I'm curious with Councilwoman Spector why this reappears, and I know that you're here to tell us about that, Ms. Rooney.
I am. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You're both actually correct. When this went through the process with the GPAC and the Planning Commission and Council, there was a lot of discussion about what should be included in the general plan. The language was revised probably 3 or 4 times. I would say I'd have to go back and look at the exact sequencing of this, and I'm not sure exactly when reference to height or stories and the reference to a hotel as a use being included was removed. I do believe it was during the council discussion, however. I don't believe it was during Planning Commission. I think it was during council, where the intent of this was simply background. It was not intended to be a ceiling. It was not intended to say the ceiling in terms of the 750 residential units and 580,000 square feet of commercial. That is a ceiling. That's been established. This language actually came from the general plan EIR in the project description. When the general plan EIR was written and published in March, this language was in there. When it went through its various revisions and through the final environmental impact review, the comments, and then comments on the comments, this was never changed. So in the final general plan EIR that was published in June of 2010 still has this language of the 4 to 5 or 4 stories, 3. The actual language is it's limit building heights to 4 stories, maximum on most of the site, provide for the possible development of maximum 5-story hotel. And in the project description, that was one of the diamonds or the bullet points, the principles. And then in the project description, it said the specific plan may also specify a hotel on the site. Because the general plan was actually finalized prior to the council discussion and the modifications that occurred to this description, that language did not change, because that's really a project description. That's what was studied. That was everything from the cap of residential and commercial square footage in units, as well as height, because there was view analysis and things like that done. Those were all established in the EIR, and so they weren't changed, and so that language wasn't removed. Staff probably shouldn't have put so much detail, because this simply was background. It's not saying that the specific plan will be based upon this. It is literally just background, and I don't think a lot of thought was given to what to include in the background. What's most important is, if you look at the scope of work, that the consultants will be working with the development team, with the staff team, and putting together a specific plan that will determine dimensional standards for the North 40, will determine uses for the North 40, which may or may not include a hotel. We don't know at this point. Will include all the development standards that be relevant to the North 40. Nothing's been established other than the ceiling at this point.
Okay. Mr. Manager.
And given the concerns raised by the mayor and the councilwoman, if the council approves the authority to execute, you could also simultaneously provide direction that there should be no presumption of 4- or 5-story buildings or a hotel until it's studied through the specific plan process, and be explicit in that direction.
All right. Councilwoman Spector.
I'm curious. I'm looking at the scope of services. I'm looking at sub G, draft specific plan, yada, 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 using criteria and policies from the Los Gatos Boulevard Plan and the Commercial Design Guidelines. One question would be, it seems like we should also include the general plan. And secondly, assuming that we have the general plan, the Boulevard Plan, and the Commercial Guidelines, how do we get proposals that are outside the scope of those 3 documents, i.e. a 5-story hotel, back into play? I don't understand how that happens.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I understand the question. How do we get that back into play? Just one comment on the general plan. It's given that this has to be consistent with the general plan. That's a given, so we wouldn't recite that. These other 2 documents are ones that may not be obvious as that. And I really wasn't quite sure of the question in regards to how do we have a hotel come back into play. So maybe you can clarify.
It was my understanding that the concept of a 4- to 5-story hotel was before the deciding bodies in the past and was removed. And now it seems like it's back in. And so I just don't understand how that's happening. And what I hear you saying is that if we do the scope of work as you contemplate it, that kind of structure would still be a consideration.
I don't think I would say that. I think what the scope of work is saying is that we will be going through a traditional planning process on the site. There is some work that has been done. The only reference to a hotel or 4 or 5 stories was removed from the general plan. The general plan has general guidelines. It doesn't, as this council remembers, we did not want to make it too specific. That's why we pulled out some of the specifics in it. And so it really is using the guidelines as well as a traditional planning process, as well as we do have a concept plan that was presented. Doesn't have heights at this point. It was just general land uses that was presented. That really is a foundation for us to look at as we're going through this planning process. That, in guidance with the general plan principles and in guidance with the Boulevard Plan, the Commercial Design Guidelines, and the public process, will define what ends up being developed on that property.
Mr. Manager.
One clarification and one suggestion. The bullets provided on LU 18 and 19, I just want to highlight the line that goes in. The North 40 specific plan will be based on the following general guidelines. Those bullets were the ones that had been previously presented that will be included. They were not optional inclusions. All prior discussion of the hotel or 4-story or 5-story buildings were options that came from the development proposal. I think it was appropriate that they not be included in this list of bullets that say will, because that's never been a policy direction that they would be included. I think, to answer Councilwoman Inspector's question, if the specific plan process and discussions and analysis were to come back with any recommendations for any exceptions to the general plan, well, not the general plan so much, the Los Gatos Boulevard plan, commercial design guidelines, or others, those would have to be flagged as exceptions and opportunities, whether it's for height, stories, uses, or whatever. That's what the specific plan process is for, is to identify those issues looking at a broader context.
Okay. I still believe that we have done a lot of work, and the general plan is the outcome, and we removed some items not just because of their specificity, but because we decided they weren't what we wanted. And so that would be something that I would just keep on the table as this moves forward. I think there's another document that I didn't see referenced here, and that is the North 40 specific plan that we have had extant since the mid-90s. And although it was not finally approved, it's been used as a planning document. Probably, I think the assumption was about 90%, near approval, just never put the finishing touches on that. But that does talk to the issue of uses and the environmental concerns, the traffic concerns, and so forth, circulation on the site. And then there was one other thing that I wanted to comment on, and that is, what are we really asking this consultant, the RRM design group, to do for us? Are they going to come back to us with a plan that is as specific as a recommendation for a 4 or 5-story hotel in some spot on this property? Are they going to come back to us with a circulation element that shows how the roadway should work? Are they going to come back to us with specific uses? Those are the kinds of things I'm curious about that would result from our approving this request.
The product that will come back to the council or come back to the General Plan Committee, to the Plan Commission, to the council for final approval will be a mini zoning document, if you want to say, for the property. It will have a range of uses. It will say what uses could be allowed. It will have development standards that will include height, everything from height to setbacks to parking ratios or parking requirements to widths of sidewalks, widths of roads. So everything that you would traditionally see in a zoning code will be in that specific plan. It will have artistic renderings of what the property could be developed as. It will have guidelines for signs, requirements for colors, materials, phasing plan, how the property is to be phased, if it's developed, how it would be phased. Financing mechanisms for maintenance and public improvements.
And I would refer you to page 18 of the general plan. This overlay requires the preparation and adoption of a specific plan that will determine the mix of uses, dimensional standards, architectural standards, phasing, and infrastructure to support the development of the property prior to approval of any entitlements. That's what the specific plan is. That's directly called for in the general plan.
The state gives us very strong direction on what should be included in a specific plan, and we'll be using that, of course, as our guidance also.
Okay, before I call on Councilwoman Spector, are we in effect starting over with the North 40 specific plan and asking this consultant to go from basically a blank page with references back to the general plan, et cetera, those other documents, the design standards, or are we actually integrating and concluding what we have done an awful lot of work on to this point in time?
And
Clarification.
The next sentence that I didn't read starts, drawing on the draft North 40 specific plan prepared in 1999, the general plan overlay designation is intended to help guide the future development of this property.
Right, and I noted that when I did my research on the general plan. I just didn't see it referenced in our proposal.
It wasn't referenced. I can tell you, though, in the RFPs that we sent out to the 5 firms that we solicited from, that was in there. They knew to look at that as a source document, and it's an oversight that wasn't added into the agreement. It's very well known to RRM that we have an existing North 40 draft specific plan that will be drawn upon. So I would say it's far from a clean slate in terms of the goals for the area. There's a lot of information the town already has that are goals for the area. They have the general plan, they have the North 40 plan. We've got our capacities, if you want to say that, were established through the general plan and the EIR.
Okay. And you say there's an oversight that we didn't call that out?
No, if I could highlight, because it was an edit I remember doing to the staff report. On page 2 of the staff report discussion, on October 29, 2010, the town distributed an RFP for updating and completing the specific plan for the North 40 area.
So you're referencing completing the specific plan.
Updating and
Thank you.
completing.
I have another comment, if you don't mind, Councilwoman Spector. Under the Oversight Committee orientation that you're asking for, and there are 4 different options that you're presenting us. And one of them is the General Plan Committee. I'm going to recommend, for purposes of expediting the process, that we reinstate the General Plan Advisory Committee to act as that oversight body. I think we've already done a selection process. They got a good cross-section of the community beyond the General Plan Committee, and that, for sake of using what we've already determined, rather than going back and attempting to develop another committee. And these people are very familiar with the general plan. They're also very familiar with this particular discussion. And I would personally recommend, and if we do come to a motion, I would personally recommend that we resolve that by recommending the GPAC as the oversight committee. Now, Councilwoman Spector, you've been very patient.
Thank you. I agree. I'm prepared to make a motion, but before I do it, I just want to weigh in with staff what I'm going to do on the agreement for consultant services, where it goes the scope of services, little sub G. Even though staff has indicated that any document has to comply with the general plan, it would be my intent on sub G to add, in addition to the Boulevard Plan and the commercial guidelines, the general plan and the draft North 40 specific plan, and also to, well, I'll make that my motion. I'm going to move to, let's see what we're supposed to be doing here. To adopt a resolution authorizing the town manager to execute the documents designated as 1, 2, and 3 on our staff report. However, with regard to the agreement for consultant services, scope of services sub G, to add as reference documents the general plan and the draft North 40 specific plan, and also to have as the reviewing body oversight committee the former general plan advisory committee.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. The approval of the staff recommendation with that addition of the other 2 documents in subset G of 2.1 under agreements, and then the inclusion of the GPAC as the oversight committee. Any further discussion?
The direction is clear to staff. The one clarification is we did provide a desk item that we, based on practice, started in 2010. You no longer actually have to approve a resolution. You just authorize the town manager to, and if that's the assumed direction. I also did want to clarify, and we appreciate the mayor raising for us the GPAC as the oversight group earlier. We were able to pull up the names of the former members and the resolution. Upon your approval of this, we would first contact them to make sure they're willing to serve, since we don't have a draft available here, and bring back then the resolution that created GPAC for you to approve in an updated form. I did want to highlight that one previously appointed member to GPAC resigned during the course of service. That was Kevin Kelly, and two of the members, Tom Spilsbury and Marcia Hanson, have since been appointed by council to other boards and commissions. So our assumption would be, unless the council directs otherwise, that it would be asking the other public members of GPAC if they'd be willing to serve on the North 40 Specific Plan Advisory Committee.
All right, thank you for that clarification. All right, any other comments before we call the question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. And I believe that concludes our proceedings for the night.